Hello, taxpayers. I'm your freelance accountant, Russ Persons. This is just a test. I wanted to see how it would sound if I just came across and without having so much scriptedness. One of the things I think that I've got a little problem with is that I tend to want to stay right on the script, and I don't really do that well with that. So let's just try something different. I want to talk today about filing status. It's a basic tax concept. Not a lot of people have a lot of problem with it, but I would consider it a basic level tax advice type thing. And let's just start out with what we need to know. Are you married? On the last day of the year, are you married specifically? So December 31st, 2020, whatever, or 2030, I guess. These things could be around that long. Are you married? If you are married, let's start with if you aren't married. If you aren't married, you've got two filing statuses, basically. Single. Single is the catch-all. If you're not married, don't have kids, you're just out there by yourself, your filing status is single. There really isn't really any other status to have. Number two, you got a kid. All right. Is the kid your dependent and lives with you more than half the year? If so, head of household. If you're married, you've got some options. Number one, married filing joint. Married filing joint is typically your best filing status because it gives you better use of all your deductions and whatnot. So married filing joint is when two people file on the same return. No, please note, I've gotten this question a couple of times over the years. Your spouse is not your dependent. I don't care if they don't work or what have you. You're filing married. Your spouse is your spouse. Spouse and dependents on taxes are different things. Just because one of you work, one of you doesn't, and that person is, quote, dependent on you, doesn't make them a dependent. If you have a child, the child will be your dependent. If you have an elderly parent or something that can no longer take care of themselves, lives with you, they're a dependent. That's the kind of easy stuff that you run into. And then there is the case of legal separation. If you're legally separated in your state, if there's a decree of separation or something, you can file as an unmarried taxpayer, single or head of household, depending on what you need to do. If there isn't any sort of legal separation, you're going to need to file married filing separate. Let's talk about married filing separate for a second. Married filing separate is whenever you can't get the other person to file with you. Whether you're going through a nasty divorce, whether or not that person just refuses to get all their crap together to get on the return. If you want to remain timely, you've got to file. So you file married filing separate. There are some penalties out there for doing that in the form of you don't get as strong of a deduction on certain things. That's just part of it. So, and the last thing is when you have a deceased spouse. When you have a deceased spouse, the year that they die, you can still file married filing joint. And if you happen to have a dependent child, you can file up to 2 years as married filing joint. You have to make sure that you qualify for that. Most tax software will ask you the right questions to properly claim that status if you need to. It's kind of a one-off type thing. Let's talk about some special circumstances though. If you're in the Catholic Church or if you're in a religion where they can annul a marriage, well, basically that means you were never married. So if you get your marriage annulled and you've been, quote, married for 2 years, then you've got to go back and file amended returns as a single taxpayer or head of household, whichever one applies. So it's kind of a nasty thing for taxes because it goes from filing married, filing joint back to single or head of household. It can cost you a lot. The other thing is if you marry someone that's not a U.S. citizen and doesn't want to be one. In many cases, they will refuse to get a Social Security number or an ITIN number because they don't want to have any opportunity to be claimed as an American citizen and have to pay our taxes. Can't really blame them for that. If that's the case, then you can't file married filing joint. You have to file married filing separate or, if applicable, head of household. And that's about it. The only other situation I can come up with is if you live in a state where common law marriage is the thing. I did have that written down here somewhere. But common law marriage is basically you're not married, but you have the obligation of common law or being married in eyes of the law. And the ones that you have to watch out for, Colorado is particularly bad. You've got Iowa, Kansas, Montana, New Hampshire, South Carolina, Texas, and Utah that have laws on the books about common law marriage. And you had some previous states that had common law marriage, but keep in mind, any court in the land can declare that you're actually married, whether you are or not. So you have to kind of watch what your state might do. And since that's a state issue, I'm not going to go into it directly. But anyway, that's a little discussion on filing status. If you have any further questions on that, comment below. Got a subject matter that you would like to discuss? Comment below. And hopefully you weren't bored. Hopefully you learned something. If nothing else, give me some feedback. Let me know what you might want to see differently. Obviously, I don't have a studio yet. I'm still working on it. But we'll figure it out, and hopefully this will turn into something fun. At least for me, I'm going to keep doing it just for the heck of it. Anyway, this is your freelance accountant signing off.